How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number in which I will be going to phone calls here very quickly, 877-973-7425. Got a couple of folks I want to let chime in on the debate before I move into Israel. You do need to know there is some breaking news, which I'll get into the moment I get after these phone calls. Joe Biden saying he opposes Israel taking out Iran's nuclear capabilities, which is exactly what they need to do. But I want to move on from the debate into that other stuff. So let me get to John's phone call from Palm Coast, Florida. John, welcome to the show.
Oh, good morning, Eric. If you would permit me, I wanted to comment on the debate, but if I could make a brief one-sentence statement concerning, you made a monologue about the abortion issue. May I do that?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. I'll refer to Occam's razor, which I know you know what that is. And my statement is that the abortion issue could be solved very easily in two words. And the two words are birth control. Now, having said that, I'll go on to the debate. I don't understand why we have to have moderators as the filter, so to speak, for what happens in these debates. The program always seems to be about them. Years ago, if my memory serves me right, and I was just a child, there was one person at the debate besides the two candidates. And that person was like a timekeeper. And the candidates would ask questions to each other. And I don't know why we don't use that to eliminate all the
Look, John, I'm glad you said that. We've got to rethink this, the debate moderators, because Margaret Brennan and Nora O'Donnell, much like David Muir and Leslie Douglas at ABC, or Lindsay Douglas at ABC News, tried to insert themselves into the debates. If you compare and contrast them, I don't care whether you like Jake Tapper or Dana Bash. The way they handled the debate between Biden and Trump is they let them talk and they controlled the clock. That's it. They didn't fact check. They didn't interject. They didn't editorialize. They let the men speak. Their job was to ask the kickoff question, and away they went, and then control time. And that's the way these debates need to be done. And if members of the national press are too high on their own supply, shut them out of it and find local anchors in swing states to do it, who would be more professional, I think, because they're less got the big egos of the national multi-million-dollar contractors at the national news networks. Lewis, you're going to be next. Welcome.
Eric, I just want to ask, why the avoidance from the debaters about not seeing our military on the world stage? I mean, we got some serious stuff going on, and we got Tim Walz, his lying about his service. I mean, we're going to go into a situation where if they don't know what they're doing, it's going to be up to the top brass to answer the questions about what we need to do. And, these
but
questions
Lewis,
need to be really asked.
I was stunned after more than 200 missiles from Iran were launched at Israel. We didn't get a single question on that yesterday. We didn't get a question on Ukraine. Particularly Vance has been strident on his position there. It was a great way to ask questions. They didn't do anything substantive on foreign policy. It was kind of wild that they didn't. They were so focused on the liberal causes of the day, climate change and abortion, that they couldn't ask questions that were relevant to the news of the day. Now, that gets me to the Iran situation. Joe Biden has decided he is against Israel taking out Iran's nuclear capabilities. Donald Trump actually weighed in on the nuclear chaos and the Iran-Israel situation. This is part of what he said.
The world right now is spiraling out of control. You might not have seen what's happened because it was a few hours ago. A lot of people were here. There's so many people outside, which we appreciate. But a lot of people were here a short time ago. Iran launched 181 ballistic missiles at Israel, and I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We're not going to make. But they are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on. She was at a fundraiser in San Francisco, a city that she totally destroyed, by the way. San Francisco was the best city in the country maybe 20 years ago, and today you can't even go there. You can't even.
I mean, look, Trump making an irrelevant campaign issue that. Let me explain to you why. And by the way, if you subscribe to my show notes, if you text data to 33777, subscribe to the show notes. Let me explain to you, first of all, the reason I say that if you clicked on my morning piece, one person died in Israel. One person died, a Palestinian man in Jericho. Kind of the walls of Jericho fell. Shouldn't laugh about this. This is horrible. The man is on a street corner, and a missile, a part of a missile, the tail of a missile, falls out of the sky and just smashes him on the ground like splat. It's like something out of Looney Tunes. And it was caught on closed circuit television. And the clip, I didn't embed the clip in this morning's piece, but I linked to it that you can see it on social media. And literally, this man is standing on a street corner, and a rocket falls out of the sky on top of him. Doesn't blow up. It's already gone. It's the tail end of the missile. Falls on him. Just plop, and he's gone. And part of him is over here, and part of him is over there. It was horrible to realize. Like I told my son last night about this happening. It's like, I don't want you to watch it because this isn't CGI. This is literally a human being dying with a portion of a missile falling out of the sky, and it was wild. It was caught on closed-circuit television. Let me explain to you why Israel needs to bomb Iran right now and why Joe Biden is wrong. We now know three things from Iran. One, Iran prefers to operate through proxy terrorist groups. Iran uses third parties for its bidding. This is Jake Tapper talking about the situation with Hezbollah.
Foreign policy. And so far, it's been very, very clear from Kamala Harris.
This is Dana Bash first,
that there's going to be on foreign policy almost no change. Yeah. She doesn't want. She's opening up some cracks of daylight in economic policy and some other policy, but not on foreign policy at all, and immigration. Yeah.
So, it's interesting. So there obviously was an attempt by the Biden administration to engage with Iran, and it obviously hasn't worked. I mean, it just hasn't. I mean, I'm not saying that any policy with Iran has worked, because it really hasn't, but you do see that Iranian proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, other militias in Iraq and Syria have become emboldened. And there is a strong argument by Republicans against what's happened. Now, I mean, again, you could look at you could go back decades and try to find one policy that worked, and you won't find one.
That's true.
That's exactly it. And they are emboldened. Iran operates through these proxies. And in operating through these proxies, Iran doesn't have to do the heavy lifting. That's number one. Number two, Iran now has a ballistic missile capability. They launched 200 of them at Israel yesterday, and their ballistic missile capability can reach all of the capitals of all their enemies in the Middle East, all of whom are our allies. They can reach Abu Dhabi, they can reach Muscat, they can reach Dubai, they can reach Manama, they can reach Riyadh, they can reach Amman, they can probably reach Cairo, they can certainly reach Tel Aviv. We saw that live on television yesterday. So Iran likes to operate through its proxies. It has a ballistic missile capability to reach our allies if it need be. And three, it really wants nuclear capability. And they are, according to Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, probably within weeks of being able to produce a nuclear reaction. Within weeks, not months, not years, but weeks, according to him. Still much longer to put it into a bomb, but they're getting help from Russia and North Korea. We know that from intelligence. So Iran is not going to, we don't believe, launch a nuclear attack at Israel. There's a caveat there. We don't believe they're going to, but what they're going to do is they're going to tell the entire world, including us, you must allow our terror proxies to operate. And if you do not, then you get nuked. They essentially want to bully the world into allowing their terrorist regime to operate. And if you're unwilling to allow their terrorist regime to operate, then you're going to get a nuclear weapon sneaked into your country by Iran. We can't allow that to happen. We cannot allow Iran to legitimize its proxies through nuclear blackmail. And that is exactly what they're going to do. Now, I say caveat on Iran is not going to do that, except Brett Stevens in the New York Times today actually makes a pretty forceful case on why we do need to do something about Iran quickly. And he mentions Hassan Nasrallah. In a 2002 speech that was recorded, here's what Nasrallah said. The Jews will gather from all parts of the world into occupied Palestine, not in order to bring about the Antichrist and the end of the world, but rather that Allah, the glorified and most high, wants to save you from having to go to the ends of the world. For they have gathered in one place. They have gathered in one place, and there the final and decisive battle will take place. In other words, what Nasrallah believed and what the Iranian regime believes theologically is that God has allowed the Jews to all gather in Israel, and once they're all there, they can be wiped out in one place instead of having to go around the world hunting them. Anthony Blinken says Iran is within a couple of weeks, it says a week or two, of being able to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for a nuclear bomb. They're not going to use it directly, immediately. They're going to hold it over everyone's head. If you hurt Hezbollah, boom. If you hurt Hamas, boom. They have would-be assassins inside our country right now plotting the assassination of Donald Trump. And Joe Biden, the president of the United States, does not want Israel to touch Iran's nuclear capabilities. Here's the dirty little secret. Democrats really believe in détente. The Democrats believe if Iran has nukes and Israel has nukes, neither will do anything to the other. But the Democrats approach this from a secular atheist worldview where there is no God, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is just now. The Iranians approach it from paradise theology. The Jews are all in one place. We vaporize them. They vaporize us. We go to heaven. They go to hell. The end times are here. That's the Iranian worldview. That's the Iranian leadership worldview, and we should distinguish between them and their people. Iran is perfectly happy to be nuclear vaporized so long as they get to vaporize the Jews, because that brings back the Mahdi, the end times, the end of the world, and paradise. And the Jews burn according to the Islamic paradise. These are not rational people, except through theocracy. And that Joe Biden and the Democrats assess all of this through a secular worldview that precludes the impact of a policy related to heaven and hell shows they're not capable of dealing with Iran. By the way, point to be made here, and I need every single person to pay attention to this. The fact that Joe Biden, president of the United States, thinks that Israel should not target Iran's nuclear capabilities, even when the Biden administration assesses Iran is within weeks of acquiring nuclear material, is another reason to vote for Donald Trump for president of the United States, who very forcefully yesterday said if he is president, Iran will be made to account for what it has done. If you want to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power that is intent on bringing about the end times, there's only one candidate for president you can vote for, and his name is Donald Trump. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. As always, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. Get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast. Follow me around social media. All of that. You should follow me on Instagram, where I put up my cooking pictures. Greg, I'm going to you next. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Eric. Real quick, your Instagram post and your Twitter post this morning about being a center and being a conservative, and there's nobody there for us. That is 100% spot on. I just feel
look, I'm glad you said that, because I feel like I am the lonely outpost here.
I have a group of guys. We read the news and your newsletter every morning, and we text each other and we comment on what you say. And it's tough. It's also tough for our military. We got to be a little bit careful here over in the Middle East. We can rotate aircraft carriers and Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and they can defend themselves and take care of themselves. But the neglect to the merchant marine in the past few years, we have one oil tanker that is over there at a time to provide fuel to the planes right now over the Abraham Lincoln. It ran aground last week off of Oman and had to be towed into port. Serious damage. It is in port for months. It's going to take a month at least to get another one over there. So we got to tread carefully, and that could be one reason, Secretary Austin and Biden, they're never going to tell you this, but if Iran decides to go after all the oil facilities in Oman and Emirates and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia in retaliation to Israel taking out Karg Island, we don't have a lot of fuel to fight back. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, and of course, the ships, the strategic reserves, all of that. That's a great point.
Yeah, it's a little dicey, and sadly, we put ourselves here.
Mm-hmm.
The USS Wasp has got engine issues over in the Mediterranean. Again, none of this is making mainstream media. You get it from some of the retired military people that are gun tubers on YouTube and certain people on Instagram and Twitter, and from the War Zone. Great aircraft blog and that group, Tyler Rugaway. You read this stuff there for propeller heads like me, but you don't see it in the mainstream news. And I'm praying for our people over there.
That is such a good point.
That we're smart.
Greg, look, I appreciate the kind words in that. I got to let you go there, but that's a huge problem. I need to talk about Karg Island when we come back. As a matter of fact, first I got to tell you about Hillsdale College, because you could be getting a lot of free show prep for your mind at Hillsdale College. If you go to, for example, ericforhillsdale.com, their podcast network is free, available on your favorite podcast app. Just look for Hillsdale's podcast network. Larry Arnn's lectures on the Constitution are available at no charge. ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up for Imprimus. Imprimus comes free of charge to you. It is brilliant. It is great. Thought-provoking commentary and lectures that have happened at Hillsdale, the transcripts of the speeches. You can get Victor Davis Hanson's series on citizenship and its value. All of this is part of Hillsdale's mission to educate. They don't indoctrinate. They just give it to you straight, the facts. And the facts, of course, are on our side on these issues. Go to ericforhillsdale.com today, ERICK. Start a relationship with Hillsdale College today. Start engaging your mind. Start exploring the foundation of this country and its values. ericforhillsdale.com, and get Imprimus. It's all free. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, and I'm going to go down an educational rabbit hole with you because people in the commentariat on television and radio are making you stupid. And it is my job, it is my goal, it is my passion to make you smart. While keeping you company wherever you are, I want to make you smart if I can. We need to talk about Tim Walz's statement last night. He insisted you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Tim Walz last night took the most radical position ever stated by a presidential or vice presidential candidate on the First Amendment, essentially taking a very restrictionist position on the First Amendment, one we have not had in this country since World War I, that there is no basis under the First Amendment for hate speech or misinformation. There actually is. The Supreme Court has repeatedly said that hate speech is protected speech. But Walz goes back to this line, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You need to understand where it comes from and why it's such a stupid thing to say. It was never actually law uttered by the Supreme Court. let me give you the background here. In 1918, in Balzer versus the United States, South Dakota farmers had threatened politicians in South Dakota saying, we will beat you at the polls if you support a draft. Why? Because the Wilson administration, Woodrow Wilson's administration, had agreed to keep Americans out of World War I. The situation began to change, and shortly after Wilson's reelection, I think it was 1916, if I remember the timeline right, but it was 1916, 1917, the end of World War I, the Americans began to enter, and Woodrow Wilson orders a draft. Americans, particularly of German descent, were outraged that the Americans would take a side in World War I. There was really no need to take a side. The war was beginning to wind down, but Woodrow Wilson decided it was America's time on the stage, and he was going to do it. So Wilson ordered a draft and then amended the Espionage Act of the United States to prohibit anyone from arguing against the draft. It was a breach of free speech. But Wilson prosecuted anyone and everyone who dared to question him. Woodrow Wilson was all of the things Democrats say they hate about Donald Trump in a person who really used the powers of the presidency to advance racism and dictatorship. He rounded up people who criticized him. He funded a brigade of brown shirts who would go around the country harassing and beating up anyone who criticized him. He would arrest people for speaking out against him. He would do all the things the Democrats say Donald Trump would do, but Wilson was a Democrat, so they give him a pass. His heart was in the right place, you know. So in Balzer versus United States, the South Dakota farmers say they're gonna challenge any politician who supports the draft at the polls. Woodrow Wilson has them all arrested. They are prosecuted and they are convicted, and their case goes to the United States Supreme Court in 1918, Balzer versus United States. And the majority of the court, we know from the record, agreed that they should be convicted. But one man, Oliver Wendell Holmes, was outraged that the idea that anyone would say we're going to beat you at the polls was somehow was a crime, was too outrageous for him, and he drafted a blistering dissent. It was such a blistering dissent that the Chief Justice of the United States at the time set the case aside, and the Wilson administration decided to abandon the convictions and prosecutions of the farmers. While all of that was going on, a man named Charles Schenck was in the United States in 1917 actively discouraging men from the draft. He was a socialist and a pacifist and opposed to the war. And Schenck was insisting that men should oppose the draft, not sign up for the draft, tear up the paperwork, not do it. He and his cohorts were arrested. They were not arrested for violating speech. They were arrested under the Espionage Act. And in 1919, the United States Supreme Court ruled that it was a crime under the Espionage Act to speak out against the draft. Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the unanimous decision. And in that decision, uttered a phrase that is to this day uttered by people who have no idea what they're talking about. He wrote, "The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. The question in every case is whether the words used are used in such circumstances and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. It is a question of proximity and degree." You will note a couple of things. One, it's not shouted fire in a crowded theater. That's not actually the phrase. It is falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. But that was dicta. Dicta is an authoritative statement of an opinion, but it's not binding. It's not in the law. Schenck went to jail, though. Shortly thereafter, free speech advocates started denouncing Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a man of great ego, cared about his ego, and began to listen to the free speech advocates. And then 2 years later, wrote a dissent in Abrams versus the United States, a similarly situated case, where he said, actually people should have the right to speak out against government policies they disagree with. And that ultimately led to the Supreme Court beginning to change its mind. And in 1969, the United States Supreme Court issued Brandenburg versus Ohio, 1969. The court held the government cannot punish inflammatory speech unless the speech is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. It was striking down an Ohio criminal statute because the statute prohibited the advocacy of violence. In other words, what the Supreme Court was saying is that it is acceptable to advocate violence. Brandenburg was a Ku Klux Klan leader in Ohio. He contacted a reporter at a Cincinnati television station and invited him to cover a Klan rally in Hamilton County in 1964. One of the speeches made references to the possibility of revenge against blacks, except they used the N-word, Jews, and those who supported them, and claimed the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court continue to suppress the white Caucasian race. Another speech advocated for the expulsion of blacks to Africa and Jews to Israel. He was arrested and charged with advocating violence. And the Supreme Court said Mr. Brandenburg, Clarence Brandenburg, is perfectly allowed to advocate for violence so long as he doesn't commit it. In other words, he could yell fire in the theater. In fact, today, I don't encourage you to do this. You can go to your local theater and you can yell fire, and it's perfectly legal for you to do this. However, if you go into a theater full of people and you yell fire and it incites a riot and people storm out, you're not going to be charged with yelling fire in a theater. You're going to be charged with provoking a riot. You're going to be charged with provoking mass chaos. You're going to be charged with that. That has nothing to do with your speech. But people use you can't yell fire in a crowded theater in a way to say that your speech can be restricted. No, you are perfectly allowed to yell fire. In fact, you can right now, wherever you are, if you're by yourself, yell fire and you're not going to jail. You can walk down the hallway of your office right now and say fire, 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 fire. You're not going to go to jail. People are going to look at you a little weird, but you're not going to go to jail. Yelling fire in a crowded theater, Oliver Wendell Holmes said nothing about a crowded theater, just a theater. And his point was that if you cause, and by the way, this was something that happened in the early 1900s. Pranksters actually did this. And in one particular case, a prankster panicked people. They started a stampede. 23 people were injured, 6 people killed. It was a thing in the early goings of theater in the United States. But it's not about speech. There's nothing to do with your speech. It has to do with if you take actions that cause a stampede or you name it, you can be held responsible for your actions. But if you want to stand up in the town square and say you think that this race of people need to be sent to wherever, all Haitians need to go back to Haiti, you're perfectly allowed to say that. If you want to stand up and scream at the top of your lungs the N-word, you might lose your job because the First Amendment does not apply to your employer, but the government's not going to throw you in jail. If you wish to stand up and offer a soliloquy on the earth being flat because you cannot see the curvature of the horizon, when you get in a plane, you fly from point A to point B. The world does not look round to you even from the height of a plane. The world must be flat. There's no evidence. Even the pictures from space show a flat planet. You may be stupid and you may be peddling misinformation, but it's perfectly legal. The American news media on a regular basis pushes misinformation and disinformation. They claim to be arbiters of truth, and oftentimes they're the ones who seed the lies. It's not against the law. If you hear someone saying you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to speech. Tim Walz, on a debate stage last night, uttered the line. What's so hilariously sad to me, though, are the number of progressives who are lawyers who rushed to defend him to say, yes, this is the case. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And so, yes, misinformation and hate speech are not protected under federal law. These people are clueless. They don't know what they're talking about. They're so busy trying to hump Tim Walz's leg. They themselves are the ones who are proverbially yelling fire in the crowded theater. They're the ones lying. They're the ones seeding misinformation and disinformation, and they can't even help themselves. At least know the truth, please. The phrase, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, does not even come from binding Supreme Court case law. It was a throwaway phrase by Oliver Wendell Holmes in a case in 1919 that the Supreme Court expressly overruled in 1969. And even when written in the case in 1919, it was not part of the legal decision. It was just an opinion offered by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and it was not meant to be you can't say it, but meant to be that if it were to spark a riot, you might be charged with sparking a riot, but you cannot actually be charged with yelling fire in a crowded theater. You're charged with starting a riot. Please be smarter than these legal commentators. And please, it's not hard to do. Please, I just beg you, be smarter than Tim Walz, who, God help us, at one point educated our children in public schools. Another reason to support school choice. Americans for Prosperity support school choice, and they'd love to have you on their team fighting for school choice around the country. They advance common sense conservative solutions to the problems that face us today, from securing the border to improving our schools with school choice. All you got to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. You sign up with them. They can teach you how to be a door knocker, to teach you how to go door to door and help get people engaged in the electoral process. They can teach you how to go to your state government or local government and advocate for school choice and common sense conservative solutions for families and small businesses. They want you involved. They've got chapters in just about every state. You can be a part of yours, and if there's not a chapter there, you might be able to help them start one. If you're committed to conservatism and you want to advocate for it and advance it, go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Sign up with AFP. They're the nation's leading largest grassroots organization. They happen to be on our side. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Sign up with AFP today. Become an activist and a warrior for free markets and free people, for common sense conservative solutions. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number 877-973-7425. David, let me go to you next. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Eric, I really enjoy the show. And I like the fact that you address it whether you agree with it as a conservative or not. I mean, that's just, you really try to take the right side, so to speak.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
What kind of reminds me of Neil Cavuto in a way. I think he does the same thing. But anyway.
His head is bigger than mine, for the record.
Yeah, might be. I was watching TV, and he was on the other day, and there was nothing else on but his head. But anyway, what I called about was, as you know, in the first rocket attack from Iran, it was mostly drones and cruise missiles, which are subsonic. Well, I'm not going to say you could shoot them down with a pea shooter, but they could be shot down pretty easily, as did happen. This next time, they fired 200 ballistic missiles, which traveled, 2,000, 3,000 miles an hour, much faster than the drones and the cruise missiles. And they also fired some hypersonic missiles, which I think travel somewhere around 10 grand, 5 to 10 grand, which are super fast. So they said they knocked most of them down. I don't know if that means 50% or whatever, but it doesn't matter. My question is, are they stepping up the activity, or are they stepping up the activity and at the same time doing intel on, the Iron Dome and David Sling and all that stuff in real time to see what would happen?
Oh, that's a great question. Here's my understanding of it is that they already know Israel's capacities because they've shown them off. And so what they attempted to do this time was overwhelm the system. They thought they could overwhelm the system, but they didn't, which is the most amazing thing. One person died.
Right. Just one more thing. The other thing is the missiles that are made by Raytheon and the Israeli contractor. I think it's a partnership in that the top two missiles in David Sling. Those are about $1 million a round, so I was reading, which I can believe. I think the stuff that Iran's firing, somebody said, is about 80 to 100,000.
Yeah.
So they spent a couple $1 million, several million, making an attack, and Israel spends maybe $500 million.
Right.
So there's something to be said for that too.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, there's disproportionate cost, and the defense is so much more expensive than the offense that Iran could do. And of course, Iran's missiles, they weren't well targeted. They actually missed. Those that landed didn't actually hit critical infrastructure. What they did try to do is they tried to take out Israel's major nuclear power facility, and they failed. The Iron Dome took those out. Even the hypersonic missiles couldn't get through. The hypersonic missiles are Mach 5, very fast, and they don't follow a parabolic curve, so it's harder to track them. Like a ballistic missile shoots up and it comes back down. The hypersonic missile fires in a regular course, and it's very fast, so it's hard to stop them. And Israel was able to stop them, which was fantastic. And now they need to blow up Iran. They need to stop them from being able to advance. When we come back, we got to turn to domestic issues, and in particular, what's happening in North Carolina, the bureaucratic warfare keeping people from being saved.